Hello, and welcome to this tutorial for English 103. My name is Emma Schmidtke, and I am the Education and Research Librarian here at Western. Today, we're going to be talking about how to move from the more general research you were doing for your literature review, so where you were trying to get a broader picture of the research that's available on the topic you picked, to looking for more specific points for your argument from scholarly articles. We're going to talk about how to pull useful quotes from those scholarly articles, as well as track down references made in those articles to other pieces of scholarly literature. As we go through the presentation today, there's one point I want you to keep in mind, and that is scholarship as conversation. So keeping in mind how scholars are in conversation with each other as they share and build on each other's research, as well as how you are going to join that conversation with your own ideas in response to the research that has already been done. This presentation assumes that you are continuing on the same topic as your literature review. If you've decided to change your topic between the literature review and this next paper, feel free to go back to Western OneSearch, develop some keywords based on your new general topic, and enter those into Western OneSearch to find some articles that are of interest to you. Otherwise, we're going to move forward with reviewing your literature review. So, looking at your literature review, what are the common themes among your sources? What did you point out as solutions to the problem that your topic covers? What are some points of disagreement between your sources? And then are there any connections between your sources? I want you to take a look at your literature review, make some notes, and then move on to this next question. What are the points of your argument/thesis? So if you're making an opinionated statement in your next paper, what are the reasons you're giving for that statement? Take a moment to write those points down. So looking at your notes that you just wrote based on your literature review, what keywords stand out? So again, keywords are specific activities, groups, impacts. Take a moment to highlight or circle some keywords from your notes or from your literature review itself. Keep in mind during this process, what ideas are most exciting to you? What do you have the most to say to in response? As we go about finding more specific sources to justify your argument, you want to think about research as a jumping off point for your own argument, so what you can respond to. Again, keeping in mind this idea of scholarship as conversation, you're going to be joining that conversation along with the scholarly articles you're finding. So to give you an example of what this process looks like of going from the literature review to finding more specific research, I came up with an example topic of grizzly bear and human interaction. I had a vague sense from some news stories that I had read that when grizzly bears and humans interact, it obviously does not go well for either party. And I wanted to learn about some ways that maybe we could minimize those negative interactions. So my keywords in Western OneSearch were grizzly bear and human interaction. And through my initial search, I began to realize that scholars often use the term wildlife management more often than they use the term human interaction. And in fact, wildlife management described better what I was looking for. So I changed my keywords to grizzly bear and wildlife management. And these were the sources I found for my original literature review. So reviewing these sources, noting some common themes, areas where they disagreed, I noticed a couple of things. Through my literature review, I noticed that the solutions that scholars were proposing to this problem of grizzly bear and wildlife management fell into two themes. So the first theme was changing human behavior. So giving people education on how to avoid grizzly bears, or giving more information about wildlife management and grizzly bears. And then the second theme was changing the behavior or habitat of the bears. So one solution was translocation, moving the bears somewhere else where they're less likely to interact with humans. Another solution was connecting grizzly bear habitats via corridors, so expanding their habitats and making it less likely that they'll interact with humans, which also relates to this other key word that a lot of my articles were tagged with, which was connectivity. So these large pieces of habitats being connected. So what I did to explore both of those types of solutions, because I was starting to get this idea that I would want to write a paper comparing and contrasting these two different ways of solving the problem. I did two separate searches. So one search was with my original keywords and then adding the words education or information to get at that first theme of changing human behavior. And then my second search was my original keywords and adding keywords like translocation or corridor or connectivity to get articles that address that separate part of my argument. And then just like I did for my original literature review for each of these sources, I made sure I was filtering by peer-reviewed in Western OneSearch to make sure that the information I was getting was scholarly. It had been verified by independent third-party experts in the field. And then I also limited the date range to information that was published in the last 5 years, making sure I'm getting the most up-to-date research that is out there on this topic. So, once I found some great articles that addressed both parts of my argument that I could use to compare and contrast these two ideas, I wanted to select some effective quotes, either to pull direct quotes from or to paraphrase. And while doing that, I wanted to make sure I avoided data dumps, aka just quoting long series of numbers from the results section of an article. Instead, I moved to the discussion section, which is where the authors of the articles interpret the results for the reader. So tells you what the results actually mean. And then I also took a look at the conclusion section, which is where authors talk about what we should do with the information that we now have. So now that we've interpreted the results, how should that interpretation affect policy changes or what organizations do differently? And to give you an example of what that looks like, I have this article here, Human Dimensions of Grizzly Bear Conservation, Social Factors Underlying Satisfaction and Coexistence, Beliefs in Montana, USA. And as you can see here, in the results section of the article, there's just this big block of numbers, percentages. I don't know about you, but when I see a big block of numbers, my brain kind of just goes blank. Those numbers in themselves are not necessarily very persuasive for me up front. I want a little bit more writing, a little bit more rhetoric that tells me what these results mean and what I should take from them. So I scrolled down to the discussion section where the authors are interpreting the results for me, and it's a great place to find those really clear, succinct quotes. So for example, in this discussion question, we found that satisfaction with grizzly bear management followed the Goldilocks principle, where satisfaction peaks when people perceive that wildlife population levels are neither too high nor too low. Again, just a really succinct quote that is just saying exactly what the study found. One thing that you may be tempted to do when looking at your articles is to quote from the introduction. Again, it's a great, introduction to the topic, so you might find a really useful quote to justify your argument. In this case, we have, on the other hand, opposition to large carnivore recovery can stem from real or perceived risk to human values and safety. I might find that really contributes to my argument and I want to use it. However, I'm going to caution against this for the reason of this in-text citation you see at the end of that sentence. That tells me that this information comes from other scholarly research. In general, we want to avoid quoting or paraphrasing what authors are already quoting or paraphrasing from another source. I want you to think about what can get lost, what can be miscommunicated or overgeneralized, the farther away we get from original research. So when we're quoting a quote and then somebody quotes our quote, so we quote their quote, you can think of it like a game of telephone, like you used to play in school, that even when you try to pass on the information as accurately as possible, something is always lost with each retelling. So if you really like a piece of information that you find in your article that comes from another source that has that in-text citation after it, what you're going to want to do is find the original source. And what that looks like is, so once I find the sentence, I see the in-text citation at the end, I'm going to scroll down to the references section of the article. Sometimes it's called literature recited or works cited. And I'm going to look for usually the last name of the authors and the dates, the year published from that in-text citation. And I'm going to match it to the full citation under the references section. From there, I am going to copy and paste the full title into Western OneSearch, and then click search, and see if we have the full article available in our own databases. If searching the full title does not work, you can also search the author names in advanced search along with keywords from the titles. So in this case, it would be Hughes, Nielsen, grizzly bears, recovery policy. If we do not have it available in Western OneSearch, then I'm going to go over to Google Scholar, which is just scholar.google.com. I am going to, again, copy and paste the full title, click search, and see if it's available for free online anywhere. If an article is ever citing government or nonprofit reports, you can also sometimes find those reports just out on the internet by looking up the title of the report in a regular Google search. So I'm going to want to track down those original sources, and then those sources are going to be where I want to pull my quotes from. So the original research is what I want to be quoting or paraphrasing. So in conclusion, from our literature reviews, we are beginning to build our arguments based on what is compelling to us in the research. So looking at common themes between our sources, common disagreements between sources, or different ways of addressing a problem. We're developing keywords that we can then use to conduct multiple new searches in Western OneSearch. Once we find those more specific sources that correlate with specific parts of our arguments, we're going to start pulling quotes from those articles. However, we're going to avoid data dumping by just pulling a string of numbers from the results page. Instead, we're going to look towards the discussion and the conclusion parts of the article to see where authors offer a really succinct description of what their findings mean. We're also going to avoid quoting quotes. So we're not going to pull anything from the articles that already has an in-text citation pointing to another author's research. Instead, we're going to go find that in that original research by looking at the references of the article, finding the citation to the original research, and then looking up that study by its full title in Western OneSearch or Google Scholar. All right, let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.